So, in a mid chapter, one of the chapters, again, it's a 7, 8, a 9, perhaps a 12, or somewhere between 7 and 12. We find the man is scheming, and the rabbit has already become very disgruntled and is unhappy with the man. And he does not believe that the man has the mental fortitude or the mental acuity to parlay the rabbit's, quite exhilarated or quite unique. His ability to speak is it's a bounty, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and the rabbit has no faith that the man has the acuity to monetize this great gift that the rabbit has been bestowed upon the rabbit. And the rabbit is very disgruntled and unhappy with the man, because the man had come home from walking the dog, and the dog was very, very happy. And when he came in, the dog was prancing and happy and nuzzled the rabbit. And the rabbit was a little bit impatient with the dog, even though the dog is very stupid and he does have no intelligence. But the rabbit, he normally is very... he's accommodating to the dog, and he's forgiving to the dog, and he gives the dog his space, and he allows the dog. He has a good attitude towards the dog, but the dog is always very exuberant and very happy. The dog doesn't know what's going on in the world, so he's always very happy and very exuberant, and this normally doesn't grate on the rabbit's nerves too badly, but today it was grating on the rabbit. Was very complex, and he had a very, very... The rabbit was very consternated, and he was very unhappy. He looked at the man, and he thought the man is not doing anything. The rabbit at this point had said, not only is the man not able to monetize the great, profound, and historic significance of the rabbit's speech, but the man, it doesn't even seem to have any hope to do anything good. The dog was prancing and bounding, and the rabbit was almost dismissive of the dog. He said the dog could go lay down. He scolded the dog, because at this point the rabbit was commanding the dog. The dog and the rabbit had a relationship from the beginning where the dog almost killed the rabbit and would have killed the rabbit, as he killed very many rabbits. But over time, because the rabbit had speech, the dog... initially and from the beginning and onward, he had very much respect for the rabbit, but now the rabbit was commanding him, and the rabbit was unhappy with the man, and the rabbit was getting stressed out. So the rabbit, he said to the dog, "Lay down, go lay down." And the dog, he went and laid down under a bed. He liked to sleep under a bed, and so the dog, he laid down under the bed. And the rabbit, he got the man off into like the living room, and he said to the man, "Hey, listen. We're not doing nothing here. We're driving the same old Corolla. Nothing. We have a little Corolla. We don't eat all that great. You try to give me some bananas, and you give me some other, you gave me Fruit Loops the other day. Fruit Loops are nothing. It's a carbohydrate. It's a chemicals in a carbohydrate." The rabbit said, "Hey, half the time you give me bananas, and the other half you give me Fruit Loops. It's nothing. I want radishes. I want greens. I want some cucumber. I want some carrot. If nothing else, I want some sunflower seeds or something. I want some rhubarb or something healthy for me. I like the vegetables. I don't like Fruit Loops or bananas. This is nothing." But the man, he was trying to tighten the belt. He had a few endeavors. The man was trying to invest a few things. The man, first off, he was trying to do dog coin, because the man loved his dog so much. When he saw Elon Musk on Saturday Night Live, he became enamored with Dogecoin, and he invested in Dogecoin. And the rabbit didn't know nothing about cryptocurrencies, so he didn't think it was such a good idea. But the man, he did Dogecoin because he saw Elon Musk on Saturday Night Live, and so this is all it took. The man, he would take a flying leap on any kind of investment. And there's a few other investments that the man was trying to do because he felt as if, you take a flyer on an investment, it could pan out, you could become rich. But the rabbit said, we have to parlay my ability to speak into some monetarization and some, we have to start reaping. We have to start reaping, but the man, he was devoting all of his money to investments, or not. He didn't have that much money, but he didn't. It took a lot of taxes, a lot of upkeep because he was an inheritor. Unbeknownst to the rabbit or the dog or any of the people who were listening to this story, the man had a very, very beautiful home, but he only occupied a small apartment in the home because prior to his father's death, his father was a very, very successful veterinarian and a very successful entrepreneur and investor. The man, he had inherited the estate and the house, and it was a beautiful driveway and a beautiful lane with ash trees and elm trees and the chestnut trees, the very last stands of elms or chestnuts in all of America, and it was a shady lane, and it was a beautiful driveway. They had Italian immigrants come, and they had laid the concrete and bordered it with orange brick, and they had agrarians come in to landscape around to the house and the perimeters and along the driveways, and they had a lovely driveway and a beautiful house, a beautiful estate. It was a beautiful it was a handsome house, estate, but the man, he only occupied a very small portion. It was an apartment, a very small apartment, probably about 500, 600 square feet. That was probably about 575 square feet that the man's father had bestowed upon him. And even after the death of the mother and the father, the man continued to live in this small apartment because he only felt this was his worth, or he felt comfortable there, but this was where he occupied. He was happy there. But, the rabbit became very unenamored. He was unenamored with the man and his prospects. So the rabbit was thinking, we're not doing nothing. We're not going to make anything. We're not going to make no monies. And especially because the man said, you're investing in Dogecoin? Dogecoin and any other fly-by-night thing. He's like Ralph Cramden trying to get on the honeymoon. She's trying to, or like Ralph Cramden investing in any, fly-by-night investment that he hears from the side, peripherally. He hears an investment. He would get involved with an investment. But the man, what the man was into now, he had an illicit, he had a front. His veterinary, the father had a very prestigious veterinary practice, and the man, he was not smart enough to go to college or do anything good. The man had a drowning incident, and we will discuss the drowning incident. He very, very narrowly avoided drowning, but he had drowned so far that everybody thought that maybe the man's brain was a little bit disheveled or a little bit verklempt. Everybody thought maybe the man's noggin was a little bit askew. Maybe it was a little bit, with the thing where you could maybe do something. You stick a knitting needle up a nose and you scramble the brain. It's a lobotomy situation. Everybody thought maybe the man had been slightly lobotomized by a lack of oxygen during a small drowning incident he suffered when he was young. And it held him back, and so the man couldn't become a veterinarian. But the man read veterinary. He read the veterinary manuals, and he became very proficient in veterinary. And he was almost like an idiot of savants. He was almost like an idiot of savant with the veterinary, because he wasn't very smart in any way, but the man, he could perform any kind of an operation, and the man had a very extensive collection of tiny instruments to do any kind of a veterinary on any kind. He did a cerebral operation on the rabbit, and he actually did a neurosurgical operation on the rabbit. He had been known for doing, brain operations on squirrels and sparrows and everything. He had tiny instruments. He had collections of tiny instruments, very, very myriad collection of very many different tiny instruments. So he could do any kind of veterinary operation he needed to do. And he specialized on the smaller animals because he felt like the smaller animals were more nuanced, or they were more, the smaller animals were more forgotten, or they weren't appreciated, and so he appreciated the little animals, and he guarded the little animals. Once he tried to do an operation on a worm, and it was unsuccessful, but he almost was successful in doing an operation on trying to reinitiate a life for a worm, to reanimate a worm. But the man, he was very, very proficient, and everybody said he must be some kind of an idiot of savant. Like if he didn't do tiny instrumental operations upon all different kinds of vertebrae, little tiny mammal vertebrae, maybe he could have been a great pianist. Maybe he could have been a concert pianist, and he could have been very successful in that venue. But the man, the man had very few customers because he was well known throughout the town as being an idiot. And no one thought at that time he was an idiot of savant. Later, after it came out that he had saved the rabbit and the rabbit had gained the ability of speech, he was known as a very, very famous and very successful veterinarian. But this was more like a post whatever you call the post, not postpartum, but post, with the death, where he had died, and afterwards he died, and then he became very famous for being a very great veterinarian. But at the time, everybody in the town thought he was an imbecile, but so he didn't have too many customers. He had a few customers, but the veterinary practice was a front for. He had an illicit trade in pornographic comic books and some other things, some other things he did fireworks. He imported fireworks from Uruguay and sold illegal fireworks from Uruguay, and he also had the opportunity through his illicit fireworks business. He sold black market fireworks that he imported from Uruguay. This led to a Pokemon. He thought he could import Pokemon cards from Lithuania, and he was going to invest a great amount of his wealth into Pokemon cards that he could import from Lithuania. But basically, the way he made the majority of his money was from pornographic comic books, where the comic book characters were drawn in disgusting. Pornographic, whatever interludes there would be, but nobody really. He didn't. And no one tried to know who he sold them to. It was very disgusting. No one was trying to know who bought these or who he sold them to, but. When the town discovered it years after his death, he became on Wikipedia. If you looked up the man's post-mortem after his death, you could. He was known as a great veterinary pioneer, and they showed pictures of him trying desperately to save a worm who had been dissegmented by a lawnmower. But he was trying to save a few segments of the worm and trying to get the worm to live. He was unsuccessful at that. He had done very many cerebral, brain, and nerve operations on sparrows and squirrels, and of course the rabbit was his most famous patient. But as famous as he was worldwide, in that town he was known for being a smut peddler and having a front where he did illicit trade behind the scenes of his veterinary clinic that he inherited from his father when he had inherited his father's estate. But the rabbit was disgusted when he discovered that the man was getting ready to invest whatever wealth he had into some kind of a Chinese rip-off Chinese where they steal the things. They're not the real thing. They're not the real Pokemon cards. They are rip-off Pokemon cards. The man was involved with an illicit trade of black market counterfeit. They were counterfeit Pokemon cards. There was big money in Pokemon cards, and but the rabbit said, "Why? You cannot sell rip-off. You cannot sell fake Pokemon cards. Counterfeit Pokemon cards. You cannot sell counterfeit Pokemon cards because you're cheating. Yeah, maybe you're making some money, or maybe the people who manufactured these illicit counterfeit Pokemon cards are making money, but the people are being ripped off." And the man didn't like it. The rabbit didn't like it. The man was happy. The man wished he could. The man would make money any which way he could, but The rabbit became indignant and was not happy at all. This Pokemon situation was not a good situation, and the rabbit was unhappy. And he told the man, he said, my friend, he sat the man down one day. They were sitting out on the veranda because the man only occupied the small apartment that was attached or part of the house. But the man would go and sometime to his father's den, his father's man cave, and watch on the big screen TV, watch the football games. He would sit out on the veranda and drink some mimosas, and in the evenings he would have a bourbon and a cigar from his father's stash and his collection of great cigars and bourbons. And the rabbit would hop out and he would hop up and say, you're having a wonderful Chianti or some kind of a thing, some kind of a very expensive alcoholic beverage. But me, you're trying to give me Fruit Loops and bananas, and I'm supposed to sustain myself on fruit. And we should be becoming wealthy and rich, and you're just living off of, you're an inheritor. You're somebody who's just living off of your father's wealth and all the things that your father accomplished or acquired. And but me, you don't have no disposable income. You have nothing. You're trying to feed me nothing, and it's in the winters. I'm eating Fruit Loops and bananas, and you couldn't even give me some lettuce. Lettuce is as cheap. Celery is as cheap as bananas. I would rather have lettuce and celery, but you're giving me bananas and Fruit Loops, and then I get to eat in the summer, in the spring, in the summer, in the fall. Perhaps I find greens out in the wild and stuff in our yard and everything. But this is not good. We're spinning our wheels. And at the time, the man didn't know it, but the rabbit was communicating to him that it wouldn't be too much longer and the rabbit would be leaving and ending their relationship. The man, he didn't comprehend that the rabbit was saying, I'm going to leave you. Perhaps you should understand. And the man, he sipped his Chianti and his cognac, and he smoked his cigar, and he sipped his, whether it was Chianti or sometimes he had some kinds of almost like licorice alcohols. No one knew what they were. And he had some brandy and some burgundy. But the cognac is the thing that the rabbit most despised, because the man would become inebriated on the cognac, and he wouldn't pay too much attention to the rabbit. And he took the rabbit for granted, and the rabbit kept saying, I'm going to leave you. Eventually, I'm going to go and find a new place to live, and we will not be together anymore, me, you, and the dog. But the man, he didn't comprehend that the rabbit was serious, and he took the rabbit for granted. And the rabbit, everybody said eventually when the rabbit left that, the man had it coming, because he didn't understand this was going to happen. He couldn't comprehend it, even though he's being told to his face that this is what was going to happen. But everybody knew that, come to find out that, the rabbit would have been nothing without the man. And the man did everything for the rabbit. The man saved the rabbit's life, and then the man enabled the rabbit to become the most famous and the most glorified and the most blessed rabbit in the history of the earth. But on a daily basis, he was not attentive enough to the rabbit. So even though the man had enabled the rabbit to achieve everything, and no one else would have done this. No one else was lining up to help the rabbit. The man saved the rabbit at the most crucial period. The man enabled the rabbit. The man used his technical abilities to save the rabbit. And without the man, the rabbit would have perished. And like every other rabbit that was ever shaken by a dog and had its neck snapped clean off of its torso. But, the rabbit should have maybe understood that the man had done all these things, but bottom line, the man didn't understand that the rabbit was disgruntled or unhappy. The man, he was trying to do some schemes and trying to get some wealth, and he was trying to do some things, but in the rabbit's eyes, the man was just spinning. He was just whistling Dixie and spinning his wheels. Nothing was happening. And so eventually the rabbit left the man. But it could be said that perhaps the rabbit should have been more patient with the man, or understood, or been more grateful to the man. But also was understood that the man should have understood that the rabbit was so unhappy and should have tried to preserve the relationship with the rabbit. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. They couldn't see eye to eye, and eventually the rabbit left the man and the dog, and he fostered a few other things. He fostered a few other things happened for the rabbit, but it was crazy because the rabbit never achieved what he probably could have achieved if he stayed with the man. And the man was never, ever, of course, the man never, ever got a talking rabbit or any kind of talking animal. Not that he didn't try. The man, he tried very frequently to develop other talking species, but he never even came close because it was a miracle. It was a miracle that was, that had Jehovah's blessing, and Jehovah was behind the miracle. So you couldn't manufacture a miracle. Only Jehovah can manufacture a miracle. So it never was going to happen again. So both the rabbit and the man were, the lost. They both, if you could step back and look at it, they both should have done a better job to maintain the unification of the relationship. And when they didn't, they both suffered. Neither one was ever to attain what they had gotten together. Neither one was ever able to achieve what they had done together. And of course, the dog was caught in the middle, and the dog's home was never the same. The poor dog didn't know exactly what was going on, but the dog was never quite as happy as when the rabbit and the man and the dog were all together. And the dog, everybody said after the end, everybody said towards the end, it was, it was the dog that suffered the most. It was the dog that had the most to lose. Perhaps the rabbit and the man, they futilely tried to keep attaining and kept on with their lives. It was the dog that was the most. It was the dog that lost the most. It was the dog that suffered the most. It was the dog that had the most to lose, and he was a victim because it was never his decision. It had nothing to do with it. He had nothing. Nothing could be. The dog had no control, but yet it was he. It was he, the dog, who suffered the most and had the most to lose and had lost the most. And it was the dog who was the most melancholy. The man was very strong, and he continued after the rabbit left him. He continued to be, to hope, and he continued to foster, and he continued to pray that a new animal would become a talking animal that he'd become associated with. And the rabbit, he thought that the man was such a dunce and such a fool and but no one ever had the man, no one ever after the man, the rabbit never experienced anybody who had his best interest at heart as much as the man had. The rabbit never understood and never fully comprehended, but it was the man who had the rabbit's best interests at heart. It was the man who was the most loyal to the rabbit, and though the rabbit found other things and was successful in other ways, he never again found anybody who loved him so much or appreciated him so much or understood his greatness or understood the intangibles and comprehended and valued the rabbit as much as the man had. And of course it was the dog. It was the dog who suffered the most, and it was the dog whose melancholy existence plowed forward, never ever achieving or never hoping to achieve what had been achieved when the unit was whole.